The morning air felt heavy as Andre Wilson stood before the polished granite headstone. 5 years had passed since he lost his son, but the pain remained fresh like a wound that refused to heal. Andre adjusted his tie, a habit from decades in the corporate world, and placed a bouquet of sunflowers at the base of the stone. Sunflowers had been Dion's favorite. "They always face the sun, Dad," his son used to say with that bright smile of his. "No matter how dark it gets, they know where to look for light." Today marked 5 years since the car accident that took Dion from this world at just 22 years old. 5 years of birthdays without celebration, of achievements without the one person Andre wanted most to share them with. As the CEO of NextGen Solutions, one of the country's fastest-growing tech companies, Andre had access to every comfort money could buy. But wealth and success felt hollow in the shadow of his grief. He knelt down, brushing away fallen leaves from the engraving that read Dion James Wilson, beloved son, bright light. The cemetery was quiet this Tuesday morning. Most people at work or school. Andre had cleared his calendar despite 3 board meetings and a product launch. Some things couldn't be delegated, not even by a man who commanded a company of 5,000 employees. "I miss you, son," he whispered, tracing the letters of Dion's name. "The house still feels empty without your music blasting through the halls." A soft sound interrupted his thoughts. Someone crying. Andre looked up, surprised to find he wasn't alone. About 20 feet away, a woman stood at the edge of Dion's grave, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. She was middle-aged, perhaps in her late 40s, with copper-brown skin and hair pulled back in a simple bun. Andre didn't recognize her as any relative or family friend. For a moment, he remained frozen, unsure whether to acknowledge her or give her privacy. Maybe she was at the wrong grave. The cemetery had hundreds of headstones after all. But no. Her eyes were fixed on Dion's name, her hand pressed against her heart as tears streamed down her face. Andre slowly rose to his feet, his knees protesting after kneeling on the hard ground. The woman didn't seem to notice him, lost in whatever grief had brought her here. "Excuse me," Andre said, his voice gentle but carrying across the small distance between them. "Did you know my son?" The woman's head snapped up, eyes widening as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. She hastily wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry," she stammered, taking a step back. "I didn't think anyone would be here on a weekday morning." Andre moved closer, curiosity overcoming his initial discomfort. In 5 years of visiting this grave, he'd never encountered another mourner besides immediate family. "I'm Andre Wilson," he said, extending his hand. "Dion's father." The woman paled visibly at his words. Her hand trembled as she reached out to briefly shake his. "Linda Johnson," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I should go. I didn't mean to intrude on your time with your son." There was something in her reaction that struck Andre as odd, beyond the normal awkwardness of such an encounter. The way she'd said your son carried a weight he couldn't quite understand. "You're not intruding," Andre assured her, dropping his professional mask and speaking with the warmth he usually reserved for family. I've never seen you here before. Were you one of Dion's professors? Or maybe from the community center where he volunteered?" Linda looked down at the grave, then back at Andre's face as if searching for something. Her eyes were red-rimmed but striking, deep brown with flecks of amber that caught the morning light. "No, nothing like that," she finally said. "It's complicated." Andre had built his career on reading people, knowing when someone was holding back, when a business partner wasn't showing their full hand. Everything about Linda Johnson screamed of secrets kept. "I have time," he said, gesturing to a nearby bench beneath a maple tree. "And I rarely get to meet people who knew Dion. Most of his college friends scattered after graduation and after the accident." Linda hesitated, clutching her purse tightly against her side. For a moment, Andre thought she might simply walk away. Instead, she nodded once and moved toward the bench. They sat with a respectful distance between them, the cool stone bench hard beneath them. Fall leaves drifted down occasionally, red and gold against the cemetery's green grass. "How did you know my son?" Andre asked again, more directly this time. Linda opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Her fingers worked nervously at the clasp of her purse. "I didn't know him personally," she finally said, "but I've come to feel like I did in a way." Andre frowned, confusion mixing with the first stirrings of concern. "I don't understand." Linda took a deep breath. My son, Terrell, was with Dion when the accident happened. The words hit Andre like a physical blow. In all the police reports, all the hospital records, all the painful details he'd forced himself to review, he'd never heard that name. There was someone else in the car? He asked, his voice hoarse with shock. The report said Dion was alone when he crashed. Linda's eyes flashed with something, anger perhaps, or deep hurt. That's what the official report says. But it's not true. Her hands trembled as she opened her purse, pulling out a worn leather wallet. From it, she extracted a photograph and handed it to Andre. The picture showed two young men, arms thrown around each other's shoulders, grinning broadly at the camera. One was unmistakably Dion. His son's smile could light up any room. The other was a tall, lean young man with warm brown skin and thoughtful eyes. "This is Terrell," Linda said softly. "My son." They were friends at university, roommates in their final year. Terrell died in that same accident. Andre stared at the photograph, his mind racing to process this revelation. How could he not have known his son had a roommate? How could such a basic fact have been missing from everything he thought he knew about Dion's life and death? "I don't understand," Andre said again, the words feeling inadequate. "Why wouldn't the police report mention Terrell? Why wasn't I told there was another victim?" Linda's laugh held no humor, just a bitter edge sharpened by years of grief. "That's what I've been asking for 5 years." She reached for the photo, but Andre wasn't ready to let it go. Still studying the faces of the two young men, one familiar, one a stranger who had apparently been important to his son. "Dion never mentioned a roommate named Terrell," Andre said, more to himself than to Linda. "We spoke every Sunday. How could he not have told me about his roommate?" A look passed over Linda's face, something complex that Andre couldn't quite read. Pity, anger, understanding? "Perhaps," she said carefully. "There were things Dion felt he couldn't share with you." Before Andre could respond, Linda's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and stood up abruptly. "I have to go. My shift at the hospital starts in 30 minutes. She reached for the photo still in Andre's hands. "Wait," Andre said, reluctantly returning the photograph. "I need to know more. About Terrell, about what happened. If there's something about my son's death that I don't know." "There's a lot you don't know, Mr. Wilson," Linda said, her voice suddenly firm despite the tears that had threatened earlier. "And I'm not sure you're ready to hear it." As she turned to leave, the wallet slipped from her hands, spilling its contents onto the ground. Andre knelt to help gather the scattered items, a hospital ID badge showing Linda was a nurse, a few receipts, some cards, and another photograph that had fallen face up on the grass. This one showed Terrell as a young boy, maybe 10 years old, sitting on the shoulders of a man whose face was partially out of frame. But what caught Andre's eye was the background, a familiar lake house with distinctive blue shutters. His lake house. The vacation property his family had owned for generations. Andre picked up the photo, a chill running through him despite the mild fall day. "Where was this taken?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Linda snatched the photo from his hand, her expression shuddered. "Like I said, Mr. Wilson, there's a lot you don't know." She gathered her belongings with trembling hands and stood. "I need to go. Please," Andre said, reaching into his suit jacket for a business card. "Take this, call me. We should talk more." Linda looked at the card, the embossed logo of Next Gen Solutions, Andre's name and title of Chief Executive Officer prominently displayed, and something like recognition flickered in her eyes. "You're that Andre Wilson," she said quietly. "Does that matter?" he asked, confused by her reaction. Linda slipped the card into her purse without answering his question. "I'll think about calling you," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. As she walked away, Andre called after her. "How can I find you if you don't call?" Linda paused but didn't turn around. "Maybe you should start by asking yourself why Dion never told you about Terrell, why he kept so many secrets from you." With those words hanging in the air between them, she continued down the cemetery path, leaving Andre standing beside his son's grave with more questions than he'd had in 5 years of grieving. He looked down at Dion's headstone, the sunflowers bright against the gray granite, and whispered, "What didn't you tell me, son? And why?" The photograph of the two young men smiling together burned in his memory. Whatever had happened 5 years ago, Andre now understood one thing with absolute certainty. The story of his son's death was far from complete. Andre barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the photograph of Dion and Terrell, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling as if they shared a secret. How could his son have had such a close friend that Andre knew nothing about? And more troubling, how could someone have died alongside Dion without it appearing in any of the reports? Morning found him in his home office, surrounded by stacks of papers he hadn't looked at in years. Police reports, medical examiner's findings, insurance documents, every official record of the accident that had taken his son. Single vehicle accident, read one report. Driver lost control on County Road 17, vehicle struck tree. Driver pronounced dead at scene. No mention of a passenger. No mention of Terrell Johnson. Andre rubbed his tired eyes and reached for his phone. His assistant answered on the first ring, despite the early hour. "Thomas, I need you to clear my schedule for the next few days," Andre said, not bothering with a greeting. "Family emergency." "Sir, you have the investor meeting at 2 and tomorrow." "All of it, Thomas. Clear everything." A pause. "Yes, sir. Is everything all right?" Andre looked at the photograph of Dayon he kept on his desk, his son in cap and gown at his high school graduation, eyes bright with promise. "I don't know yet," he answered honestly. "But I need to find out." His first call was to Raymond Fletcher, a private investigator he'd used for corporate background checks in the past. The man's gruff voice suggested he'd been woken up, but he didn't complain when Andre mentioned his fee would be tripled for urgency. "I need everything you can find on a Linda Johnson," Andre explained. "She's a nurse, probably at County General based on the direction she was heading yesterday. She had a son named Terrell who died 5 years ago. I need to know where she lives, her background, and most importantly, any connection she might have had to my family before yesterday." His next call was to his lawyer, who sounded considerably more awake. "I need the complete, unredacted accident report for Dion's crash," Andre said. "Not the summary I was given, everything." "Andre, it's been 5 years," his lawyer said gently. "What's bringing this up now?" Andre closed his eyes, seeing Linda Johnson's face, the pain etched into every line. "Just get me the files, Richard, please." By afternoon, Andre was parked outside County General Hospital watching the staff entrance. He'd considered simply calling the hospital to confirm Linda's employment, but something told him to be more careful. If there were secrets around his son's death, he couldn't risk alerting anyone to his investigation. At 3:45, just as Raymond had reported from his preliminary findings, Linda emerged from the building. She looked tired, her scrubs partially hidden under a light jacket. Andre waited until she reached the parking lot before approaching. "Ms. Johnson?" he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She froze anyway, her hand halfway to her car door. When she turned, her expression hardened. "Are you following me, Mr. Wilson?" Andre stopped a respectful distance away. "I prefer to think of it as continuing our conversation." "At my workplace? That's not a conversation, that's harassment." Andre held up his hands in a gesture of peace. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for." Linda glanced around the parking lot, then back at Andre. 5 minutes, she agreed reluctantly, but not here. They ended up at a small coffee shop 2 blocks from the hospital. Linda ordered tea but didn't drink it, just wrapped her hands around the mug as if seeking warmth. "I've spent the day reviewing everything I have about my son's accident," Andre began. "There's no mention of Terrell anywhere." Linda's jaw tightened. "I know. Why? How is that possible?" She stared at him, measuring her words. "You really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" Andre felt his frustration rising. "Please, just tell me what's going on." Linda set down her mug with deliberate care. "Your company, Next Gen Solutions, what exactly does it do?" The question seemed so off-topic that Andre almost refused to answer, but something in her steady gaze made him comply. "We develop security software, government contracts mostly, though we've expanded into the private sector over the past decade. And your biggest competitor 5 years ago was Tech Vault Systems," Andre answered automatically, then frowned. "What does this have to do with our sons?" Linda looked down at her untouched tea. "Terrell was interning at Tech Vault the summer before the accident. In their product security division." Andre felt a chill that had nothing to do with the coffee shop's aggressive air conditioning. "And Dion? Was he involved with Tech Vault too?" "No," Linda said. "Dion was just trying to help his friend. At least that's what Terrell told me in the weeks before." Her voice trailed off. "Before what?" Andre pressed. "Before they died." Before the accident that wasn't an accident at all. The words hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Andre leaned forward, lowering his voice. What are you saying? I'm saying, Linda replied, meeting his gaze directly, that our sons were killed because they discovered something they weren't supposed to know. Andre felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. Murder. She was suggesting murder. Not a tragic accident, but a deliberate act. That's a serious accusation, he managed to say. Yes, it is. Linda reached into her bag and pulled out a small, battered notebook. This was Terrell's. The police returned his personal effects a month after the funeral. I didn't have the heart to look through everything right away, but when I did, she slid the notebook across the table. Andre opened it with shaking hands. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, diagrams, and what looked like snippets of code. Terrell discovered a backdoor in one of TechVault's security products, Linda explained. A deliberate vulnerability that would allow someone, presumably whoever paid for its inclusion, to access supposedly secure systems. Andre flipped through the pages, his mind racing. And you think TechVault killed our sons to cover this up? That's impossible. Linda's laugh was sharp. For a company with government contracts worth billions? For people whose entire business model depends on trust? Andre shook his head, not in disagreement but in disbelief. If this is true, why go to the cemetery yesterday? After 5 years, why that particular day? Linda's expression softened slightly. I go every month on the 15th. Yesterday was different because... She hesitated. Because Terrell's former supervisor at TechVault was just named their new CEO. I saw the announcement in the business section. It felt like a final insult. Andre sat back, trying to process everything. If what you're saying is true, there should be evidence. Not just notes, but proof? Linda interrupted. You think I haven't spent 5 years looking? Every lead hits a wall. Every person who might have known something has either been promoted to silence or has conveniently left the country. The police investigation was closed so quickly it barely happened at all. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Andre asked, the question that had been burning in him since their meeting at the cemetery. Linda looked at him with something like pity. Because, Mr. Wilson, your company and TechVault have 3 joint ventures and a shared history of government work. For all I knew, you were part of the cover-up. The accusation stung, but Andre could understand her reasoning. The tech security world was small, and competitors often collaborated on certain projects. I would never, he began, then stopped. Would he have believed her 5 years ago? A grieving mother with wild accusations against a major corporation? He wasn't sure. What changed your mind? He asked instead. Why talk to me now? I didn't change my mind, Linda said quietly. I didn't plan to talk to you at all. She looked away. Sometimes I talk to Terrell at Dion's grave. It feels like they're still together somehow. The simplicity of her explanation made Andre's throat tighten with emotion. I need to see everything you have, he said finally, and I need to look at Dion's belongings again. There might be something I missed. Linda nodded slowly. I have a box of Terrell's things from college. Notes, his laptop. I could never bring myself to get rid of them. Tomorrow, Andre decided, we'll meet and go through everything. If someone is responsible for our sons' deaths, they need to be held accountable. As they stood to leave, Linda hesitated. There's something else you should know. That photo you saw yesterday, the one at your lake house? Terrell told me Dion had invited him there for spring break. He said... She paused as if unsure whether to continue. What? Andre prompted. He said Dion was nervous about it. About how you'd react to Terrell being there. Why would Dion be nervous about bringing a friend to the lake house? Andre stopped as understanding dawned. Were they more than friends? Linda met his gaze steadily. Does it matter? Andre thought about it. Really thought about it. No, he said finally. It doesn't change anything about how much I loved him, how much I miss him. For the first time since they'd met, Linda's expression softened into something like approval. Tomorrow, then, she said. My place, 10 a.m. I'll text you the address. As Andre watched her walk away, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 5 years. Purpose. The grief that had been a dull, constant ache was transforming into something sharper, more focused. If someone had taken his son from him, had orchestrated what everyone believed was a tragic accident, he would find out, and they would pay. He took one last look at the notebook in his hands. at Terrell's careful documentation of what he'd discovered. Then he placed it securely in his inner jacket pocket, close to his heart, next to the photograph of two young men with their whole lives ahead of them. Lives that had been cut short, perhaps not by fate or carelessness, but by calculation and greed. "I'll find the truth, Dion," he whispered as he walked to his car. "I promise." Linda's apartment was smaller than Andre had expected, a modest two-bedroom in an aging building on the east side of town. The living room was neat but crowded with mismatched furniture that spoke of a life built piece by piece. Family photos lined the walls, Terrell's face smiling down from various ages and occasions. "I kept everything as it was," Linda said, leading Andre down a short hallway. "His room, I mean. People told me it wasn't healthy, but..." She shrugged, pushing open a door. Terrell's bedroom remained frozen in time. Basketball trophies on shelves. Computer science textbooks stacked neatly on a desk. A calendar from 5 years ago still hanging on the wall. Days crossed off until the date of the accident. Andre felt like an intruder in this preserved shrine to a young man he had never met. "I did the same thing," he admitted quietly. "Dion's room is exactly as he left it. I keep telling myself I'll donate his clothes, his books, but I never do." Linda nodded, understanding in her eyes. "The boxes from his dorm room are under the bed. I picked everything up after..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Together, they pulled out several storage containers. While Linda opened Terrell's laptop, Andre began sifting through papers, photographs, and the ordinary debris of a college student's life. "What exactly are we looking for?" he asked after 30 minutes of searching, yielded nothing more than class notes and typical mementos. Linda looked up from the laptop screen. "I'm not sure. Terrell's computer was wiped clean when I got it back from the police." "I always thought that was strange," Andre frowned. "Wiped clean? As in formatted? All his files, his emails, everything gone. The police claimed it must have been damaged in the crash, but the laptop itself wasn't even scratched." Andre sat back on his heels, thinking. "I never checked Dion's computer. After the funeral, I just packed everything away. Do you still have it?" "In storage with the rest of his things from college. I could have Thomas retrieve it today." Linda nodded, then reached for another box. "Let's keep looking here first." 3 hours later, they had spread the contents of all the boxes across Terrell's bedroom floor and the living room. Textbooks, notebooks, USB drives that turned out to be either empty or containing only school assignments. Nothing that pointed to any dangerous corporate secrets. Andre rubbed his tired eyes. "Maybe we're chasing ghosts." 5 years is a long time." "No," Linda said firmly. "I know what Terrell told me. He was scared, Andre. In those last few weeks, he was looking over his shoulder, checking his phone to see if he was being followed." "That's real," Andre didn't argue. He remembered the day before Dion died, their last phone call. His son had seemed distracted, had ended the call quickly, saying he had something important to take care of. At the time, Andre had assumed it was just school stress. Now he wondered what else he had missed. His phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Retrieve the boxes from storage. Delivered to your house as requested." "We should go to my place," Andre said, showing Linda the message. "Dion's computer is there now." As they drove across town, the contrast between their lives became even more apparent. Andre's house sat on 3 acres in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. The sweeping driveway led to a modern glass and stone structure that had been featured in architectural magazines. It was beautiful, impressive, and since Dion's death, painfully empty. Linda said nothing as they walked inside, but Andre saw her taking in the soaring ceilings, the expensive art, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a perfectly landscaped garden. "It's just for show," he said, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "Most days I only use the kitchen and my bedroom." "It's a beautiful home," Linda replied diplomatically. Andre led her to the garage, which had been converted into a storage area. Thomas had placed 3 large boxes in the center of the floor, each labeled in Andre's neat handwriting: Dion freshman year, Dion sophomore year, and Dion junior year. "He died during spring break of his junior year," Andre explained, opening the last box. Inside were clothes, books, sports equipment, and wrapped carefully in a sweatshirt, a laptop. Andre lifted it out, surprised by how emotional he felt holding this piece of his son's life. "Let's take it inside," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. In the kitchen, They set up the computer on the island counter. When Andre pressed the power button, he was surprised to see it still had some battery life. "I kept everything charged," he explained when he saw Linda's questioning look. "All his devices." Just in case, and just in case of what? He had never completed that thought even to himself. In case Dion somehow came back? In case there was something important on them? In case letting them die would be like losing another piece of his son? The laptop booted up, asking for a password. "Do you know what it might be?" Linda asked. Andre stared at the prompt. "I'm not sure. Let me try a few things." He typed basketball 1999, Dion's birth year and favorite sport. Access denied. He tried Next Gen Dion, the joke nickname his son had used. Access denied. After 3 more failed attempts, Andre sat back, frustrated. "I should have known this. A father should know his son's password." Linda placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Don't. We all have private parts of our lives, even from those closest to us." Andre nodded, then straightened as a thought struck him. He typed sunflower always and held his breath. The screen unlocked. Sunflowers were his favorite, Andre explained, feeling a bittersweet triumph. He always said they knew where to look for light. They began searching through Dion's files. Most were typical college content: essays, projects, photos from parties and campus events. Nothing about tech vault or corporate espionage. "Check his email," Linda suggested. Andre opened the email client, surprised to find hundreds of unread messages, condolence notes that had arrived after news of Dion's death spread. He scrolled past them, looking at the last emails Dion had read before he died. "Wait," Linda said suddenly, pointing at the screen. "That one, from Terrell." The subject line read simply, "Backup plan." Andre clicked it open. The message was brief. Everything copied to the cloud drive. "Password is what we talked about at the lake. If I don't check in by midnight, follow the protocol we discussed." What cloud drive?" Linda asked, leaning closer to the screen. Andre shook his head. "I don't know." "And what password? What did they talk about at the lake?" They continued searching, finding more emails between Dion and Terrell, but most were about ordinary things. Classes, basketball games, plans to meet up. Nothing else about any evidence or backup plans. "This doesn't make sense," Andre muttered. "If they had discovered something big enough to get them killed, where's the proof?" He closed the email program and was about to shut down when he noticed an icon in the dock that he didn't recognize. It looked like a simple line drawing of a sunflower. Clicking it opened a password prompt. Linda leaned forward. "Try the same password as before." Andre typed "sunflower always." Access denied. Something about the lake, he mused, remembering the email. What would they have talked about at the lake house? He tried several combinations, the lake name, the address, even lake house, all denied. Linda studied the screen. The email said what we talked about at the lake. Not the lake itself, but a conversation they had there. Andre closed his eyes, trying to imagine Dion and Terrell at the lake house. What would they have discussed that was important enough to become a password? "When I was young," he said slowly, opening his eyes, "my father told me that our family had owned that land for 4 generations. That we were the first black family to own property on that lake. He said it was our legacy, our place of peace that no one could take away." He typed legacy into the password field. "Access denied. Peace?" Linda suggested. Andre shook his head, then paused. "Wait, there's an inscription on the boathouse. My grandfather carved it. Truth becomes the foundation upon which we build our peace," he typed. Truth Foundation, and the program opened. Inside was a folder labeled simply Evidence. Andre and Linda exchanged a look before clicking it open. The folder contained dozens of files, screenshots, documents, and what appeared to be snippets of programming code. "Look at this," Linda said, pointing to a document titled Tech Vault Backdoor Summary. Andre opened it and they began reading together. The document detailed exactly what Linda had described: a deliberate security vulnerability built into Tech Vault's flagship product, one that would allow unauthorized access to any system using their software. "Dion wrote this," Andre said, recognizing his son's writing style, but the technical details must have come from Terrell. They continued exploring the files, finding email exchanges between Tech Vault executives discussing the backdoor, referring to it as Project Skeleton Key. The emails had been forwarded from Terrell's work account to his personal one, then to Dion. "This is it," Linda whispered. "This is what got them killed." Andre nodded grimly, clicking on another file labeled Recipients. It contained a list of names: journalists, government oversight officials, cybersecurity experts. They were going to blow the whistle, he realized. Send this evidence to everyone who could expose TechVault. But they never got the chance, Linda said, her voice breaking. Andre stared at the screen, at the evidence his son had died protecting. A wave of grief mixed with pride washed over him. Dion had been trying to do the right thing, even knowing how dangerous it might be. "We need to be careful," he said finally. "Whoever arranged the accident might still be watching. We need to make copies of everything, store it somewhere safe." Linda nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. "And then we finish what our son started." Andre looked at her. This woman he'd only met days ago, now bound to him by shared tragedy and shared purpose. "Yes," he agreed. "We make them pay for what they did to Dion and Terrell." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the kitchen windows, they began making their plans, unaware that their search for the truth had already set off silent alarms in places they couldn't imagine. And somewhere in the city, someone who thought this secret had died 5 years ago was about to discover they were terribly wrong. 3 days after discovering the files on Dion's laptop, Andre sat across from his company's head of cybersecurity in a soundproof conference room. He had chosen to meet at a coffee shop downtown rather than at NextGen's offices, away from curious eyes and ears. "So you're telling me this back door is still active?" Andre asked, keeping his voice low despite the privacy. Philip Chen, who had worked for Andre for over a decade, nodded grimly. "From what I can tell, yes. I've been analyzing the code snippets you provided. It's sophisticated, almost elegant in its design. Whoever created this knew exactly what they were doing." Andre tapped his fingers on the table, thinking. "And the market reach? TechVault's security suite is used by 47% of Fortune 500 companies, 12 federal agencies, and at least 30 foreign governments," Philip replied. "If someone has access to this back door, they could potentially breach any of those systems." The implications were staggering. Corporate espionage, government secrets, personal data of millions. Who would benefit from something like this? Andre asked, though he already had suspicions. Philip spread his hands. "Take your pick. Foreign intelligence services, criminal organizations, competitors looking for an edge. The question isn't who would want it, it's who paid for it." Andre nodded, thinking of the emails they'd found. Several had referenced payments and the client, but never by name. "I need you to keep digging," Andre said. "But be careful. If what I suspect is true, people have already died to keep this secret. What are you going to do?" Philip asked. Andre looked out the window at the city skyline, at the TechVault building visible in the distance. What my son was trying to do. Expose the truth. After meeting with Philip, Andre drove to Linda's apartment. She opened the door before he could knock, her expression tense. "Someone was here," she said without preamble. Andre stepped inside quickly, closing the door behind him. "What do you mean? A break-in?" Linda shook her head. "Nothing so obvious. Things were moved, slightly, but enough that I noticed. Terrell's laptop was in a different position. Some papers were rearranged." "Did you call the police? And tell them what? That someone came into my apartment and didn't steal anything? Just looked through my dead son's things?" Linda gave a bitter laugh. "They didn't listen 5 years ago. They won't listen now." Andre placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We need to move everything to a secure location. My house has an alarm system, security cameras." "No," Linda interrupted. "Your house would be the first place they'd look. You're the CEO of a major tech company looking into a competitor's secrets. You're not exactly low profile." She had a point. Andre thought for a moment. "I have a cabin, about 3 hours north, off the grid. No internet, no cell service unless you're on the lake. My father built it, but I haven't used it in years." "That could work," Linda agreed. "When do we leave?" "Tonight. Pack only what you need and everything related to Terrell and the evidence." While Linda packed, Andre made arrangements. He called Thomas, informing him he would be unreachable for a few days on a personal matter. He contacted his VP of operations, putting her temporarily in charge. Then he called Raymond Fletcher, the private investigator. "I need information on current and former TechVault executives. Andre explained. Specifically, anyone connected to their security product division from 5 years ago. And I need to know if any of them have ties to government agencies or foreign entities. That's a tall order, Raymond replied. Lot of potential suspects. Focus on whoever would have had authority to approve a major security feature or flaw, and anyone who got a significant promotion or bonus around that time. I'll see what I can dig up. Where should I send the information? Don't send it anywhere, Andre said firmly. Call this number when you have something and I'll tell you how to proceed. By nightfall, Andre and Linda were heading north in his least conspicuous vehicle, a 5-year-old SUV he kept for trips to the mountains. They had packed Dion's laptop, all of Terrell's notes, and copies of everything stored on multiple encrypted drives. Do you think we're being paranoid? Linda asked as the city lights faded behind them. Maybe no one was in my apartment. Maybe I just misremembered where things were. Andre kept his eyes on the dark road ahead. 5 years ago, our sons were killed because of what they discovered. I don't think we can be too careful. They drove in silence for a while, the radio playing softly between them. Tell me about Dion, Linda said eventually. Terrell mentioned him often in his calls home, but I never got to meet him. Andre smiled despite the circumstances. He was surprising, always zigging when I expected him to zag. I wanted him to study business, follow in my footsteps. Instead, he chose philosophy and computer ethics, said he wanted to make sure technology served humanity, not the other way around. That sounds like something Terrell would have respected, Linda observed. He was always talking about the responsibility that came with coding skills, how what they built could help people or harm them. They must have had some fascinating conversations, Andre said, feeling again the ache of all he had missed, all he hadn't known about his son's life. I think they challenged each other, Linda said. Terrell mentioned debates they would have about the future of AI, about privacy versus security. He said Dion always made him think deeper. The conversation continued as they drove, sharing stories about their sons, filling in gaps in each other's understanding. By the time they reached the cabin, the first gray light of dawn was breaking over the pine trees. The cabin was rustic but solid, built of heavy logs with a stone chimney. Inside was simple. A main room with a fireplace, a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom with running water from the well. Solar panels provided basic electricity. It's perfect, Linda said, looking around. No one would think to look for us here. They unloaded their supplies and evidence, then Andre got a fire going in the fireplace. As warmth filled the cabin, they spread their materials across the wooden dining table. So what's our next move? Linda asked, warming her hands around a mug of coffee. Andre pulled out his notes from the meeting with Philip. We need to identify who commissioned the back door. The evidence we have proves it exists, but not who's behind it. And then what? Go to the FBI? Andre frowned. Maybe. But first I want to talk to someone at Tech Vault. You can't be serious, Linda said, alarmed. They're the ones who... Not everyone there can be involved, Andre argued. This kind of operation would be tightly controlled, known only to a few key people. There must be someone we can trust. How would you even know who that is? Andre pulled out his phone, showing her a list of names. I had my assistant pull up everyone who left Tech Vault under unusual circumstances in the last 5 years. People who quit suddenly were demoted or transferred to dead-end projects. Someone who might have discovered what was happening and got pushed aside. Linda looked at the list. That's smart, but also dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous, Andre reminded her. But we owe it to Dion and Terrell to finish what they started. They spent the morning organizing the evidence, creating a timeline of events leading up to the accident. By afternoon, they had identified 3 potential whistleblowers from Tech Vault, former employees, who might be willing to corroborate the evidence. They had Andre's satellite phone rang as they were discussing how to approach these potential allies. It was Raymond Fletcher. I've got something, the investigator said without preamble. A name keeps coming up in connection to the security division 5 years ago. Guy named Victor Harlow. He was head of special projects, then suddenly got promoted to chief security officer right around the time of your son's accident. Andre's grip tightened on the phone. What else? Here's where it gets interesting. Before Tech Vault, Harlow worked for the CIA, cybersecurity division, and he still maintains connections there, unofficial ones. The CIA, Andre repeated, meeting Linda's questioning gaze across the table. So this could be a government operation? Or Harlow is selling access to whoever's willing to pay, Raymond suggested. Either way, he's at the center of this. And there's something else you should know. What? He's been named the new CEO of TechVault. Announcement went out last week. The very news that had driven Linda to visit Dion's grave that day, setting everything in motion. One more thing, Raymond added. I followed the money as you suggested. Harlow bought a vacation house in the Caymans 3 months after your son's accident. Cash purchase $5 million. For a guy making a corporate salary, that's quite a bonus. Send me everything you have on him, Andre instructed. And Raymond, be careful. This guy is dangerous. After ending the call, Andre filled Linda in on what Raymond had discovered. So this Harlow person ordered our sons killed, she said, her voice shaking with anger. And now he's been rewarded with the CEO position. It looks that way, Andre agreed grimly. But now we have a target. Someone to focus on. Linda stood up abruptly, pacing the small cabin. I want him to pay. Not just go to prison, though I want that too. But I want him to feel what we've felt. To lose everything. Andre understood her rage. He felt it too. A burning in his chest that threatened to consume him. But beneath it was something else. A voice that sounded remarkably like Dion's, reminding him of what truly mattered. Justice, he said quietly. That's what Dion and Terrell wanted. To expose the truth and let justice take its course. Linda stopped pacing, tears in her eyes. Will it be enough? Will it bring them back? No, Andre admitted. Nothing will do that. But it will mean they didn't die for nothing. They worked late into the night, organizing the evidence into a clear, irrefutable case against Victor Harlow and his accomplices. As Linda finally went to get some rest, Andre remained at the table, staring at a photograph of Dion and Terrell he had brought with him. We're close, he whispered to the smiling faces. We'll finish what you started. Outside the cabin, an owl called in the darkness. The sound echoed across the lake, carrying into the night like a promise, or perhaps a warning. The Next Gen Solutions boardroom fell silent as Andre finished speaking. Around the massive table, the faces of his board members reflected shock, disbelief, and in some cases, outrage. Let me get this straight, said Patricia Howard, the longest-serving board member. You're accusing Victor Harlow, the new CEO of TechVault, of not only creating an illegal backdoor in their security products, but also of arranging the murder of your son and his friend to cover it up? That's exactly what I'm saying, Andre replied calmly. And I have the evidence to prove it. It had been 2 weeks since the discovery at the cabin. 2 intense weeks of carefully gathering additional evidence, of making discreet contact with former TechVault employees, of building a case that was impossible to ignore. Andre and Linda had worked day and night, fueled by a shared purpose that had forged an unbreakable bond between them. This is, began the company's legal counsel, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. Shocking. Horrifying? Criminal? Andre supplied. Yes, it's all of those things. But it's also the truth. He gestured to the screens at the front of the room, where Philip Chen was displaying the technical evidence of the backdoor, the money trail linking Harlow to offshore accounts, and testimony from 2 former TechVault employees who had come forward after being approached. Why bring this to the board first? Asked another member. Why not go straight to the FBI? Andre leaned forward. Because what I'm planning to do next will have significant repercussions for Next Gen. Our companies have joint ventures. We operate in the same market. When TechVault falls, and it will fall, there will be shockwaves throughout the entire industry. I needed you to understand why I'm doing this. It wasn't the full truth. Andre hadn't told them that he'd already sent a secure package of evidence to the FBI, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and 3 trusted journalists. That wheels were already in motion that couldn't be stopped. This meeting wasn't about getting permission. It was about preparing his company for what was coming. I'm not asking for your approval, Andre continued. I'm giving you notice. In 48 hours, this evidence goes public. TechVault stock will crash. Clients will flee. There will be criminal investigations, congressional hearings, and class action lawsuits. And some of that scrutiny will fall on us as their competitor and occasional partner. The room erupted in voices, some arguing for caution, others expressing support. Andre let them talk, his mind drifting to Linda, who was at that very moment meeting with federal agents, sharing her part of the story. Finally, Patricia raised her hand, silencing the room. Andre, I've known you for 15 years. You built this company from nothing into what it is today. If you say this is the right course of action, I believe you. She looked around the table. Our job now is to prepare for the fallout and to stand behind our CEO. One by one, the board members nodded their agreement. Andre felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He hadn't been sure how they would react, whether profit and stability would outweigh justice. Thank you, he said simply. Now let's talk about next steps. 2 days later, Andre stood in his office watching 3 different news channels simultaneously on the wall-mounted screens. Each showed the same story. The tech vault scandal was breaking, worldwide. Tech giant accused of creating secret backdoor and security software. Read one. Headline: FBI raids tech vault headquarters, announced. Another: CEO Victor Harlow taken in for questioning, declared the third. Andre's phone hadn't stopped ringing all morning. Journalists seeking comments. Business partners wanting reassurance. Government officials requesting meetings. He had instructed Thomas to hold all calls except one. When that call finally came, he answered immediately. "It's happening," Linda said, her voice tight with emotion. "They arrested Harlow an hour ago. The agent I've been working with says he's already trying to cut a deal, offering to name others involved." "Are you watching the news?" "Yes, it's overwhelming. I keep thinking about what Terrell would say if he could see this." Andre understood completely. "Dion would be proud, I think. Proud that we finished what they started. Do you think it will stick? The charges, I mean. People like Harlow have expensive lawyers, powerful friends." "The evidence is too strong," Andre assured her. "And there are too many eyes on this now. He can't make it disappear." There was a pause on the line. "What happens now?" Linda asked. "After all this is over?" It was a question Andre had been asking himself. For 5 years, grief had defined his existence. Then for these past intense weeks, justice had been his driving purpose. What would fill that space now? "We make sure our son's legacy lives on," he said finally. "Beyond just this case, beyond Tech Vault." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about a foundation. Something that would support ethical technology development, protect whistleblowers, maybe fund scholarships for students interested in tech ethics." "In Dion and Terrell's names," Linda's voice warmed. "They would have loved that." "Will you help me build it?" Andre asked. The question felt significant, extending beyond just the foundation. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "I'd like that very much." Later that afternoon, Andre met Linda at the cemetery. It felt fitting to come full circle, back to where their journey had begun. The autumn day was clear and cool, leaves drifting down around them as they stood before the 2 headstones. Dion's familiar one, and beside it a new one for Terrell, recently moved from another section of the cemetery. "I still can't believe you did this," Linda said, looking at the matching stones now side by side. "They should be together," Andre said simply. It seemed right. They had brought sunflowers, Dion's favorite, and placed them between the graves. On the news playing on phones and televisions across the country, the story continued to unfold. Victor Harlow was facing multiple federal charges. Tech Vault's stock had plummeted. Clients were demanding answers. Government agencies were launching investigations. But here, in this quiet corner of the cemetery, none of that seemed to matter as much as the simple fact that the truth was finally known. "I've been thinking," Linda said after a long silence, "about that photo, the one of Terrell at your lake house." Andre nodded. It had been one of many mysteries they'd solved in recent weeks. Dion had indeed invited Terrell to the lake house during spring break of their sophomore year. They had taken the photo themselves with a timer. It had been their first weekend together as a couple, not just friends. They were happy there, Andre said. Dion's old bedroom had a picture I never noticed before. The 2 of them on the dock at sunset. They're not looking at the camera, just at each other. You can see it in their faces. Do you think they knew? Linda asked. How dangerous what they discovered would be. Andre considered the question. I think they understood the risks. But they believed that exposing the truth was worth it, even though it cost them everything.